And welcome back to the Young Dad Podcast. Whether you're outside grilling, mowing the lawn, changing dirty diapers, chasing them little rascals around, or maybe just maybe you got them down. You're like, this is my time. Finally get to sit back, we're listening, and listen to my favorite podcast. So whatever you're doing, wherever you're at, thanks for being here and thanks for tuning in. Really excited that you're joining me today. And joining my guest, Kent, a licensed counselor and the founder of Adults with Divorced Parents Ministries. Ken has spent 2 decades helping adults who grew up in divorced homes understand how those early experiences affect their adult lives, especially in relationships, parenting, and self worth. His book, Choose a Better Path, and his work at hopeforadp.com offers tools for healing that don't blame, but instead empower. And I think this is a really great conversation that we're about to have today, everybody, because if you are in a divorced marriage or you are going through this is going to let you know some of that back end stuff that our kids may experience as they get into adults. And so I'm really excited for that because I think we don't talk about the adult. We talk about the child fairly often, but those things typically do linger and go into adulthood. So with that, make sure you grab your juice box, grab a snack, and let's welcome Kent to the show. Kent, welcome.
It's a pleasure to be here, Jay.
Of course, it's a pleasure to have you. So take us back a little bit. How did you get into what you're doing now?
No, basically, my parents got divorced when I was 13. And up until that point, I had a fantastic relationship with my dad. I know many of your listeners, some of your listeners may not have had that experience, but I basically worshiped my dad. There was nothing he could do wrong. And I enjoyed spending time with him. My parents got divorced, and I went from seeing him every day to seeing him 3, 4 times a year for a couple hours at a stint. So it created some difficulties. My mom did a great job trying to raise an angry young man and 2 daughters. But basically, if you had asked me and said, "Is the divorce affecting you?" I would have said, "Nah. I mean, the holidays are a hassle, and my dad remarried twice. Basically, I had some anger issues, but that was always other people's faults. But basically, I would have said, I'm good, not a problem." But what I learned, I had attended a marriage retreat, and basically I felt that God had said, "Kent, if you don't get your act together, you're on the same emotional path as your dad." And my dad, at that point, had already divorced twice and was heading towards his third marriage. He was an adult child of divorce from an adult child of divorce from an adult child of divorce, which is very common. And really, I got woken up to the fact that there were a couple of things I just was not recognizing. One, that the divorce was still impacting me, even though I would have denied it. And two, there were millions of me out there. Basically, half of everybody listening today has divorced parents. And yet nobody talks about this. Nobody talks about the issues. So I was serving on a church board at the time. I'm a researcher by heart, interviewed counselors and adults with divorced parents and counselors and authors, and did tons of research, and basically said, we need to tell people about this. And the board said, well, tell them. And I did my first all-day seminar 20 years ago, basically to share what I had learned. And ever since then, I've been staying on the cutting edge of how adults with divorced parents are being affected and providing resources for them.
Oh, that's really cool. Because I think you're right here because I'm thinking about it as you're talking here and talking about the adult and talking about what the adult's going through later in life or what the kid goes through later in life. And we don't really talk about that. We really focus on the parents that are going through the divorce. At least in every conversation I've had. We've talked about the divorce itself, the circumstances around the divorce, maybe a conversation I've had with a good friend of mine. She's a lawyer. We talk about divorcing a narcissist. We talk about the men, and I've talked about the mental health and the decline and and that aspect of it for the men as they're going through it. But I don't think I've actually talked too much about like the kid or like the impact and what that impacts later. Because as you mentioned, it's very, very common that when a child comes from a broken home, they'll then create a broken home.
Yes.
But then that will then create the next generation because we look for, as crazy as it is, we want to not be our parents, but we end up being our parents in a lot of
Huh?
ways.
Yeah.
And that's just, it's not even, it's just genetics, it's the whole nature. It's the whole nature versus nurture argument. And, we'll very much do the same and it'll follow us that way. So it's very interesting, very interesting. So what you mentioned that when you were a teenager, you were going through it, your parents got divorced. You would put up this whole "I'm fine."
Mhm.
kind of front. You mentioned that. And so why is it so many of us we just go with the, I'm fine. It's a hassle, but it's fine kind of thing when on the inside, like you mentioned, you're angry, you have emotional detachment, and now you have some fear for what's next. And how did that impact you specifically going from your teenage years into your adulthood and then into many, many different relationships, or I don't know, many different relationships, but like friendships and business relationships and church relationships and actual, intimate relationships as well.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'd like to say one thing. My ministry, we are not about bashing divorced parents. The Bible's really clear. You need to honor your father and your mother. So, in fact, if anything, I love my parents more having worked through all this stuff than in the initial stages where there was just a lot of anger and blame and all that. The second thing is in our conversation today, we're going to be looking at two types of divorce. We're going to be looking at divorce like I experienced when I was a kid, and we're going to look at gray divorce, which is when parents wait until the kids are grown to get divorced, which is
Okay.
now double digits. I mean, you see the silver single commercials and all that sort of stuff that's on TV now. Uh, People are divorcing after 35, 45, 50 years. They're
Mm,
deciding to, throw in the towel. So we're going to look at both of those types of divorce. But
mm,
one of the things that we miss, and you really nailed it on the head, Jay, is that when a couple goes through divorce, the perception is that 80% of our time is spent on logistics. Who gets the kids? Where's the money go? Alimony and all that sort of stuff. And 20% of it's emotional. In reality, there's a book called Home Will Never Be the Same Again. It's by Friedenberg and I forget the other person, but they talk about gray divorce. And they say that basically divorce is 80% emotional and 20% logistics. But yet we spend all our time on the logistics. And one of the things that the research shows is that when our parents divorce, the number one issue that impacts us, and again, we're talking to young dads and others, but a lot of men out there, the number one issue that adult children divorce experience is anger. We have unexpressed anger. And there's a number of reasons, a number of issues that create that, but just a couple of them is loss. When our parents divorce, there is a lot of loss. We can lose our standard of living. We had a house and now there's two houses and we can lose our friends. Maybe we were in sports and we're away every other weekend. So we can't do the sports we were doing. We may lose a whole side of the family because they're on the wrong side. There's a lot of loss that happens. We lose routine. As young people, we love routine. One thing that really gets blown apart when parents divorce is routine because now you've got to change routine when prior to the divorce, and that's a whole nother conversation, but basically it's very kid centric. Everything revolves around the kids, and you can have another conversation with somebody about whether that's good or bad. But after the divorce, it's very parent centric. Everything revolves around the parents, and the kids feel they have no control. And we have anger. So there's lots of loss. The other issue that we'll cover with anger is what I call the loyalty challenge. Basically, which parent do you love the most, me or dad? In some
mm.
cases, it is actually said. I was talking with somebody and they said, "Oh, yeah, my dad came into my room. I was 9 years old and said, well, we're getting a divorce. Who do you want to live with, me or mom?" And that is really, but more often it's kind of subtle where you're at your band concert. You get done playing your instrument and the parent and the teacher says, "Okay, go sit with your parents." Well, your mom's on one side of the auditorium, your dad and his girlfriend on the other side of the auditorium. Which way do you go? And you're thinking, well, if I sit with my dad, who I'd really like to see, because I don't get to see him that much, so my mom's going to be upset. If I sit with my mom, she's going to be upset because she doesn't like his girlfriend. And actually, I don't like the girlfriend either. But if I sit with him, then he's going to be upset. If I sit on the other side, he's going to be, and this kid's 9 years old. And what happens is then the next day he's at school and somebody takes his pencil and he goes, whack. And the teacher goes, "Why'd you do that?" And he says, "I don't know." And the problem is that young man grows up and he's still angry. And although it's politics, it's the daughter, it's the wife, it's the job, it's whoever, we're angry. But in reality, he's still angry and still doesn't know why. So we step into that as to how do we deal with that anger? First, we have to identify the anger is there, and it's probably linked to the parents' divorce. So that's one issue that I deal with quite a bit.
Makes sense. And I think it's important to note too, just from a purely a psychological standpoint, I have my master's in psychology, developmental psychology, and I work in mental health every day. And so I think it's really important to note that anger's not your first emotion. Anger is a secondary emotion stemming from some unmet need, some unaddressed initial emotion. So, kind of like you were saying there, it comes from the loss. Maybe it's from, losing the relationship with your mother or father, or going through or the grief, or it could be just from the sadness, or it could be from, you had these needs that you were getting met with your dad, and now your dad's not there, and you can't meet your needs kinda thing. Or, there's the carousel of people coming in and out for this child, because you think of it coming on one side, but it's happening on both sides. This carousel as well. It's happening on both sides, and it's the same child just experiencing in two different settings. And so there's a lot of things that come with that, with the divorce for a child, and
Beverly and Tom Rogers have an acronym because you mentioned, all the issues that create anger, and it's a secondary. It's the thing we see, but it's not really what's going on. And they have an acronym called GIFT that basically, if you're having anger issues, you ask yourself, "Am I feeling guilty? Am I feeling inadequate or inferior? Am I feeling fearful, or is there some sort of trauma?" Is gift,
I like
guilt,
that. I
inadequacy
like
or
that a lot.
inferiority, fear, or trauma. Because if you chart it over time, you'll find that sometimes it's guilt. Your wife said that you should take out the garbage. You forgot. Next thing you know, the dog is in it and it's all over the thing. And, well, am I the only one that takes out the garbage around here? It's probably guilt. However, with guys, if you chart it over time, almost always it's inadequacy or inferiority. Guys hate to feel inadequate. And as a result, what we see is anger. It
Mhm,
might be fear. It also can be trauma. I mean, divorce is a traumatic experience depending on what you went through. But an awful lot of time, again, we're talking to a lot of dads out there, and you're trying to be a good dad, you're trying to be a wife, or trying to be a good husband, you're trying to do work, and we can feel inadequate, and it can come out as anger.
mhm. Yeah, yeah, and it just follows you, right? It just follows you. Anger is so bad for yourself. It's so bad for your body to carry that, and it gets you into a lot of trouble, and then you just get labeled, the angry kid, or these our kids then get labeled the angry kid, and they have all these behavior issues, and then I've sat in those rooms countless times because I work with youth and families, and it's so often when it shouldn't be, it's so often a blame game. It's so often, well, this doesn't happen at my house, doesn't happen at my house, and when in reality, guess what? It actually is happening at your house. You're either just not noticing it, or you don't want to admit that it's happening also at your house as well, because you want to be seen in a different light than this other person here, and that's I think that's normal, and we don't wanna always admit the issues that are going on in front of us, because we wanna downplay them. We wanna downplay them. We wanna, like, invalidate them, and we don't wanna, admit that they're happening, because
But
we
we're
don't want
hurting.
anything. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
we're hurting. It's the most, doing this for 20 years. Yeah, I focus on the adults who have divorced parents, but you can't do that without wallowing in the pain and the emotional pain and the trauma of divorce. That's one of the reasons we don't bash divorced parents. It is second only to the death of a spouse, the emotional trauma that divorce causes. So these parents, they're reeling. And even though, everybody, half of all the marriages, which is not true, are getting divorced and all this sort of stuff. When it happens to you, it's like a snowflake. You're going through it, you're trying to get information, and the parents are in a tailspin. You're being rejected. So there's all sorts of emotional issues. And unfortunately, a lot of that contributes to what you're talking about, that back and forth, whatever. And that just reinforces the loyalty challenge. One of the issues with gray divorce is that you still have the loyalty challenge, but you're grown enough now to know why the other parent is a deadbeat, why my needs aren't being met. So it makes the loyalty challenge even more intense because they treat you as, well, you should understand why I'm angry and why your mom is of this or why your dad is of that. Now, because you're older, when you're a kid, you get it kind of by default. But as an adult, when they divorce after 35 years, well, you've seen how I'm treated. You've seen, and it makes that loyalty challenge even more intense.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think too that, especially as we get older and we see for ourselves, and we obviously distance. I think kid will distance, not always, but I think some occasion, let's say half, because it's a choice either way, but they'll distance themselves emotionally from both sets of parents, to make sure that they're protecting their own emotional well-being at the end of it through this loyalty challenge. And then, they want parents still want justification at the end of the day for their actions, for what they did and how they treat them and things like that. And they want a way out, right? Because I think the parents, they're feeling guilty. They're feeling, they're reminiscing in the shoulda, woulda, couldas, and I should have been better. Justify my people love to have their shitty behavior enabled, right? People love to have their crappy behavior enabled. And find a reason for that enabling. And often they will look to their child to be that enabler for them, to be that justification, means to a justification, because it's just like you said here, that you should understand that. You should know better than anybody, and it should justify those actions for them. When in reality, the parent should be taking responsibility for all those emotions and for what they're feeling. And I think the loyalty test definitely gets harder as you get older, and especially as you get married as the child now, and then you have a family, and now you're trying to navigate multiple different homes. You're trying to navigate multiple different situations. You're not trying to upset anybody. And then sometimes your spouse will point out like what's going on there isn't is not normal, especially if they come from a totally different situation, which is common, I think, as well. And I don't think people from the same socioeconomic and same upbringing always end up together. I think it's common they do, but I think that sometimes people are able to see you're kinda always doing stuff for your dad, and he's always like this, or your mom's like this, and it takes that outside perspective to kind of, break the glass on the reality that you're living in so that you can, look at the pieces and be like, "Whoa, that's what was going on the whole time?" Break that mirror and really help you see the reality of it and get through it. I think that becomes even more true when you have kids, because then you're thinking of your kid and you're thinking of, "Okay, do I wanna bring them around here? Do I wanna take them here? Do I wanna take them there?" But then that loyalty comes in, it's like, well, they're all grandparents and, hopefully they all wanna be involved and they all can be involved because that would be good. And there's just so many elements there, right? So many elements, and you don't wanna hurt anyone's feelings because that's how you grew up, and you're, like, in this cycle of, I don't wanna hurt this person because I love them, they're my parents, and I don't wanna hurt them, but at the same time, I don't wanna put my child there, but if I don't take them, then they're gonna be mad at me, and then if I don't do what they say, all the things, and the cycle continues, and the thoughts continue, and that loyalty is tough. But I think at the same time, if we're the parent and we're coming from that, we have to earn that loyalty, right? That loyalty is not freely given, and as our kids grow up and they start to think more and more and more for themselves, I truly, truly, truly believe that every child will see who was truly there for them at the end. They'll truly see who the problem was. They'll truly see who actually was the bad guy. And they'll be able to look back and realize, wait, dad still showed up. Dad and this and it's very often because I'm saying dad because it very often is dad that gets the shit end of the stick here. Like you mentioned in your situation, he went from seeing him every day to a few times a year. Like that's incredibly hard for a child. And we look back and we see the reasons why, and we look at the situation and we're like, man, I believe every child will get to here to where they see it and they're like, wow, that wait, he wasn't the and it was more so my mom was the what the and your whole reality just kind of implodes after that, uh,
Yeah, yeah.
and blows up, and I say this so strongly and like I'm speaking from experience or something, because I am, and I see it, and I see how it affects my children, having gone through a divorce myself and raising them in this dynamic. But I think back to my situation, and mine was very unique. I was raised by my grandma. My dad had limited involvement. My biological mother has no involvement. I haven't spoken to my biological mother since I was like 15. I'm 30
Wow.
now. I've talked to her maybe twice in the last 15 years.
Wow.
She has no relationship with her grandkids. She never met them. She never went to either of my weddings. She wasn't invited. I don't have any relationship with her. I have a very strong relationship with my dad. But the reason that relationship with my dad became so strong and it came very quickly is because my dad showed me the truth. My dad legitimately showed me the court papers with my grandma, and that kind of broke some relationship and some of that loyalty with my grandma, because when you see the court papers and you see how things are actually supposed to be, and you're 15 years old or 14, 15 years old, and you see it and you're like, whoa,
Yeah.
I've been hating you my whole life because I was told to. But now that I'm in front of you and I see the actual truth, I'm old enough and can comprehend this enough that I was drugged through a situation that wasn't fair to me because both parties weren't fully aligned with what they were trying to do. And I missed out as a child on birthdays with my dad. I missed out on trips. I missed out on experiences. My dad showed me every letter that he sent. He showed me the return letters. He showed me the return envelopes. He showed me the records that he kept of the calls and the offers and everything to try to spend time with me and to get me on all these things. And I'm just like looking back, and I think back now and I'm like, whoa, like I missed out on so much just because of one person's ego, just because of one person. Of course, my grandma, bless her heart, was trying to do the best she can. All her kids were already raised and things like that. I have a lot of empathy and a lot of forgiveness for what she went through and how she had to go about it all. And it was 1995. She was 45, and all her kids were supposed to have been out, and she was supposed to be enjoying her life with her husband and my step grandfather, and you know moving on with life. And then this 2-week old gets dropped on her doorstep, and she figures it out after that. And yeah, so it's just it's not a divorce situation, but there's still legal paperwork and things like that help me understand. And uh and my kids going through it now, I truly believe that they'll see that and realize, dad never missed a game. He's always on all my school stuff. He's always there. He always showed up. He always gave his time. He always sacrificed. He switched jobs multiple times. He sacrificed some earnings. He moved around. He kept us fed. He kept us close. He kept us warm. He kept us safe. He gave us all the time and all the attention he had. Yeah, did he have his issues? Yeah, of course I have my issues. I'm not
We
perfect,
all do.
but it's like they'll look back and be like, he took us to church. He made sure we learned about Jesus. He made sure that we did all this. And mom kind of just, she either, just kind of rode the wave or didn't show up kind of thing. But
Yeah.
we still went over there half the time. But man, when we were at dad's, we enjoyed and this and these experiences and this time and whatnot. And then we were over there, it was like we're just kind of there living in her new world and things like that. And I truly believe my kids are going to see that as they continue to get older and they continue to grow up, and they'll realize these things, and that they'll be pointed out to them by their peers or by others around them, kind of things, and in the ways they get pointed out. So
Jay, you're absolutely right. And one of the things when I deal with people that are going through divorce, because again, I'm a licensed counselor too. I have my own counseling office, and then I have the ministry that deals with adults with divorced parents. So in the counseling office, I deal with all sorts of stuff.
mhm.
But whenever I have somebody that's going through divorce, one of the things that I that's my big thing, exactly what you just said, that I always say, take the high road. With co-parenting, there's certain co-parenting rules. You never badmouth their parent, the spouse, the mom, the dad, or whatever, to the kids, ever. And you never put the kids in the middle. And sometimes it'll feel like we're losing the battles, but I always focus them on the war. Because down the road, exactly like you said, Jay, more times than not, down the road, they will see, you know what? Dad never badmouthed mom. Mom was trashing him, or dad was trashing her all the time. But she never said a bad thing about dad. Dad never said a bad thing about mom. They always did whatever, and you'll feel like you're losing in the battles. But down the road, it might be when they're 25, it might be when they're 35, when they have kids. But I have seen it over and over and over again. It's exactly like you said. The light bulb goes off, and one of those days they go, wait a minute, who I thought was the enemy, for lack of a better word. No, that wasn't it at all. And that's why I really stress with the couples, if they're going through a divorce, take the high road. Because if you burn the bridge and you badmouth them, like they're badmouthing you, when the light bulb finally goes off with the kids when they're grown, they have nowhere to go. And when you take the high road and you don't put the kids in the middle, and man, are they tempted to do that. And when you don't badmouth them ever, you never say something bad within earshot of those kids. Down the road, it's exactly like you said. The light bulb goes off and they get it. We just have to hang in there because a lot of times the parents want it now. And I'm always like, no, just hang in there. You take the high road, and down the road, more times than not, way more times than not, the light bulb goes off, and then you've got them for the rest of your life after a few years of, a problem.
Yeah, you're running a marathon in this situation. You're not running a sprint.
Yes.
You gotta hang on. Even though it's tough, it's really tough,
Uh-huh.
and you want to hang on, but you don't want to hang on because you're like, this needs to happen already, and you do just have to give it a chance, and you do just have to let it come to full circle as it will, 'cause it will come full circle one day, regardless. And kids, they may make the wrong choice, even though you know in your heart that they're making the wrong choice, or you feel like they're choosing the wrong side of this issue, kind of thing. We all grow up, we all change, we all see it. Circumstances will have us see it and change it as it is.
Yeah,
Yeah, it all comes around. But speaking of, staying in or making the wrong choice or feeling like what's waiting too long, let's talk about gray divorce. It's something I actually hadn't thought of too much, but I think it was more so portrayed in, I think, for me, for my generation. Not to say you're way older than me, Kent. You look
probably are.
you look great. You look great.
It's oil of Olay.
But I'm a millennial, and I think for us millennials that are now growing up and raising kids, I think the whole aspect of parents divorcing after the kids grown up, I think that was something we more so saw in media portrayed to us, right? That was what was common. It's like, even if, you fall out with this person, or you end up hating them or resenting them or things like that, you stick it out, wait till the kid's 18 and graduated high school, and then you're set free, right? Like, this is only really an 18-year contract and commitment kind of thing. And then you're good, move on, things like that. Count your days, pretty much. Set your timer. But now it's like you mentioned, more than half the people, or about half the people. I wouldn't say it's more than, I'd say it's about half. Because I think we're going backwards with that number. I really truly believe we're going backwards with that number in society in general. Having good marriages, having less divorce, things like that, for couples that do end up getting married. But we also have a lot of couples that are getting divorced at the same time still, because there's things like a no fault divorce, and there's all these other laws and things that have gone into effect that make it, easier and, non-biblical for reasons to get married, things, or get divorced and whatnot. But that's a totally different topic here. A different rabbit hole to go
Long
down with.
topic. Yeah,
Yeah, long topic. But then
that's
you got
one
to
I
get in,
avoid.
yeah, you get into the Bible, and then you talk about, well, the only reason you should get divorced in the Bible is it with adultery, and then you go into, all these laws made by man for no fault divorce and all that whole rabbit hole, and it's the whole thing. But really, the truth of it is, divorce, there isn't really just a break to divorce just because you're tired, or just because you fell out of love with this person, or you don't want to put the effort in, or you're tired of the marriage, or you want the shiny new toy and you can't have the shiny new toy. It's all just made by man, for man's convenience, to be able to, quote unquote, upgrade or go after the shiny new toys, or, you know, fall into the things that we covet and things like that, which absolutely is what it all is at the end of the day. It's just because I covet this, I want it. And so I'm going to make myself a way as man to go and get the thing I want, regardless of how it affects the other person. But back to gray divorce. That's my take on kind of no fault divorce, things like that.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a law made by man, for man's convenience to get the things that they're coveting after or lusting after. But it affects, how does it affect? So, gray divorce, as you mentioned, when parents split after the kids have grown up. They're in adulthood and then they split. They call you, you're 20 years old, probably in college, and they call you up and say, "Son," my old man voice. They go, "Son, time that your mother and I split. We've done this thing for 27 years, and uh we're just done now that you kids are all grown and stuff like that. So you can come to my house for Christmas. I'm gonna be living down the street, and your mom's gonna be staying at the house, and blah 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 blah." And that detachment's already there. That detachment's probably already been there. This has already been probably a handshake agreement. They've probably already been seeing other people on the low and keeping it out of the kids' frame and whatnot. And you know, yeah. So, but what impact does the gray divorce have
Okay.
on adults after it's grown up? Is it easier or is it harder?
In a lot of ways, it's harder. First of all, 70% of the divorces are filed by women. That's up from about 69% for decades. It was 69%. Now it's up a tick to 70%. And right now, with gray divorce, which is double digits, one in every three divorces now is 55 or older. 25, 35, 45 years, 50 years, I think 52 years, I think is the longest I've actually dealt with. But the
Like,
big thing now,
just stick it out and be companions. Like, come on now, come on,
well,
just
basically what's going on is because of the me sort of focus is it's I've got 30 years left and I'm not going to be unhappy with this bum or this witch for my last 30 years is basically how they're looking. It's not infidelity. That went to number 2 years ago. Now it's just I'm just not happy. And one of the problems is that they believe, and again, I'm not bashing divorced people. I'm not, throwing them under the bus or anything. They just there's myths that they believe that are just not true. First of all, the biggest myth is that it's not going to affect the kids because they're grown. They really believe that. And it's not
100%.
true. It is absolutely, and like I said, in a lot of ways, it's worse. And here's why. There's a few things that the gray divorce creates. The first thing is that there's no support. If you're a child, you're 14 years old, 13 years old, and your parents get divorced, unlike when I was a kid, back in the Flintstone times, it was basically today you've got Focus on the Family, you've got divorce care for kids, you've got all sorts of divorce books for kids, you've got, the youth pastor or the guidance counselor at school. Everybody's aware now that divorce is not great for kids. If you're an adult and you're at work and you tell somebody that I just got a call from my mom and she's divorcing my dad or my dad's divorcing my mom and we just celebrated their 37th anniversary. The response you're going to get in most cases is, well, what's the big deal? You're grown, you're out of the house. What's the problem? Don't they deserve to be happy? There's no
Yeah,
support. And what happens
yeah,
is that your entire world is coming apart. You've now
yeah.
got 2 Christmases. You used to go to grandpa and grandma's house. Now you're going to grandpa or grandma's house. You have to explain it to your kids. It just totally falls apart. So that's one big problem. The next big problem we addressed a little bit already, and that's TMI because too much information. Because they treat you like a friend or an adult instead of a kid. When you're a kid, good parents, if you will kind of shield you from the gruesome details. When you're an adult, I don't want to hear that mom is not satisfied because of whatever, dad's, whatever, and all these years he's been unsatisfied. Hello, la, 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 la. I don't want to hear that. But yet they will talk to you as a friend instead of a child, and they will put these burdens on you, and boundaries becomes very, very important with gray divorce because they will tell you all sorts of stuff, but all sorts of burdens on you, and it becomes really problematic. So you have, first you have the support issue, then you have TMI issue. We talked about the loyalty challenge. What happens if you don't like the new person that's coming along? You have this guilt thing going on. They want you to be happy for their new person. And you're not. You're still reeling from all the craziness. And we start to get separated. There's the issue of, we talk about guilt. Siblings are not on the same page. You would think that the girls would go with mom and the guys would go with the dad. Not the way it works. I've been at this for a long time and I have yet to see a pattern as to who picks who. Even if there's infidelity, even if there's abuse or whatever, there's no pattern as to, so the siblings will split one on one camp and one on the other camp.
Mm,
And then you have the whole issue of boundaries. These parents are divorcing with gray divorce situations. When you're divorcing after 37 years, you're looking at people 55, 60, 65 years old. They are now divorcing at a time when health issues are becoming more of an issue, when a lot of times they're not as computer savvy as the younger people are, and everything is online now. They're doctors' portals, they're,
mhm,
finding divorce paperwork, everything's online. And you kind of want to just go, you know what? If you want to get divorced, go for it. But you can't. You kind of get sucked into it like a vacuum
mhm.
because who takes care? Now, dad's eating burritos and Mountain Dew for breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day. I mean, who deals with that? It used to be mom. Now it's mom. If dad left, is mom okay financially? And that burden that should be on them spills now onto the adult kids. So not only are you dealing with parents on one end, you're dealing with kids on the other end, and you end up with this huge boundary issue. So that's just some of the reasons why gray divorce, although it's perceived as not a big deal, in a lot of ways is worse.
Oh my gosh, I didn't you don't think about these things. You don't think about
No.
these things. I think it for most people, beyond the ones that are listening to this conversation and kinda having their eyes open a little bit, um, where they're saying like, "Oh, well, yeah, my initial reaction has always been, uh, well, you're a grown adult, you're fine. Like, move
Uh-huh.
on. Like, it doesn't
Yep.
affect you that much." But no, you're so totally right here because it's like, okay, not only does it affect me now, it also affects my spouse. It also affects the grandkids
Mhm.
because
How
now
do
the
you
grand
explain that?
how do you explain that to that grandma and grandpa's house is just grandpa's or just grandma's house, and
Or
now grandma has
grandma's new boyfriend?
yeah, grandma has
How
a
do
new
you
boyfriend.
explain that?
You can't explain that to a child. You can't.
We don't even understand it.
No, we
We
don't
can
want it to
explain it
happen
to our
either. But it's like you're the whole again, it's one of those glass shattering, reality shifting moments because the whole reality that you've grown up in for 18 or 37 or 40 or 20, whatever, wherever you're at after 18 years, right? Your whole reality has
Yes.
always been mom and dad and they're happily ever after. But now you're 25, they call you up one day and they tell you what happened and, or you come home, you hadn't talked to them for a while, you come home, you go off to college, you come home after a year or 2, and now all of a sudden they're sitting there, but you can tell it's different. You can tell that things aren't the same, and they break it to you kinda thing, and you're like, "Whoa, that all happened while I was gone?" Kinda thing, and it just, it changes everything for you. It changes your whole reality and your perception of reality.
And there's nowhere to go, and that's the biggest problem. That's why I really appreciate your willingness to have me on and to talk about this because nobody is talking about this. In Friedenberg's book, Home Will Never Be the Same Again, which deals with divorce or gray divorce, there's an interesting quote in there from one of the people they talk with, and they said, "There's no home anymore."
Yeah, that's what I was about to
And
say. I was
think about
literally
that.
thinking that. I was literally thinking that. Is
And
that
there's no
there
them anymore.
yeah.
How powerful those little four-letter words are. Home, them. It's gone. And it just there's the emotional it's like taking a puzzle, throwing it up in the air, and it landing, and there's puzzle pieces all over the place, and now you're looking at each piece and saying, "Was it real?" And that's assuming, and we hear this too, "Well, we only stayed together because of you." I mean, really? And again, no
But then
malice
that
intended, no
but then
whatever,
that leads
but
to the but then that leads to more thoughts though, Kent, of like, "Well, you only stayed together because of me, so you got divorced because of me
that's right,
at the
exactly.
same
It puts the
time."
burden on us,
Yeah, and that's exactly what
and
you're saying
then
here.
we have
It
nowhere
always
to
falls
go.
on us, and then we're forced to pick a side essentially because we're an adult,
Yep.
and we have to help our parents take care of our parents and things like that, and now these other people are in the picture giving their
Yep.
opinions and giving their thoughts, and they're trying to, get some control and grip of the situation, and it's just a mess. It's just a mess.
It really
And that's
is. It
that's why I
really
think
is.
if it's gonna happen, which it could happen, half the time it's gonna happen, and it beyond repairing, you've tried repairing it kinda thing, you've literally done everything it takes. You've gone to a few counselors, you've gone to counseling, you've taken some classes, you've gone on a couple retreats, and you've done all the things to try to repair it, and it's just still not working, then I truly think it's better just get it done and over with while even if the kids are young, going through school or whatever. Just get it done. Don't prolong it for 5 years, 10 years, 2 years, a year, get it done. Get it done, bite the bullet, go through the experience. Because either way, it's gonna be hard, but I
But
think it
do everything you said, but like you said, Jay, do everything first.
Mhm.
Because what's
Yes.
happening and your generation, we are slaves to algorithms now.
Yeah. Well,
And the
my
problem
generation
is that
also is so incredibly selfish,
well, yeah, I mean, but
and generations
the
after mine.
algorithm thing is a huge deal right now because if you're unhappy and you go online and say, "My wife does this," or "My husband does this," or "Doesn't do this," or whatever, you're gonna start getting everything on Instagram, Facebook, social media, YouTube, everything is going to start saying what a deadbeat they are and how you don't deserve this. Everything. And that's all you see. And what you need is and the reality of it is most of what I see, and I do a lot of couple work, is gender issues. You know, the Bible says God created us male and female. And what we don't understand is males are males and females are females. Males tend to be logistical, ladies tend to be relational. And there's not a right or wrong in that. Ideally, when you put it together and we understand the strengths and weaknesses of both, we make it work. But what happens is he's like, what's all this emotion? You know, it was always so emotional. You know, if she would just be more like me, everything would be okay. And she is like, well, man, I feel we never talk. We never communicate. I don't feel connected and whatever. If he would just be more like me, everything would be okay. Well, God didn't create him like you, and he didn't create her like you. He created you male and female so we would be more like Christ, as iron sharpens iron. And a lot of what we have now is gender issues where we have, and it's not taught. The Feldhans have excellent material. They have a book called For Men Only and For Women Only. And basically, the For Women Only is what makes men tick, really makes men tick. And then they came out with For Men Only, what makes women tick. And it is fascinating when you look at the basic differences of how God created us that makes this tension thing because we're different. And when we identify the fact that it is not us, them, if you have a problem with how your wife is, you know, whatever, and I'm not talking about neglect, abuse, any of that sort of stuff. I'm talking about just the way she is, the way he is. Most likely, you're having an issue of how they're designed. And what we want to learn is how do we respond to that? Instead of reacting, how do we respond? So before we head for the lawyer, I really encourage people. There's some excellent, for men only, for women only, great books. Love and Respect, Emerson Eckerich, great book. Learn how we're wired. And instead of, when we have that flame of discontent, that flame of whatever, instead of throwing gas on it, throw cold water on it and you'll see things come down. I've seen it over and over and over again where I have maybe one of the spouses, he's not doing this, she's not doing that, whatever. And I change how we tone, how we deal with them, how whatever, and the whole thing changes. So before we rush off to the lawyers, make sure, like Jay said, that we are doing everything we can. And again, to be who we are. We're so, and Jay, you know, you've seen it. It's always you mentioned it, pointing the fingers. If they would just change, if they would just change. Biblically, God looks in the mirror. He has us looking in the mirror. It's about us. Are we walking in the Spirit? Are we walking in kindness and gentleness and peace and bearing with one another and forgiving one another and loving one another? And are we walking in that instead of waiting for them to do it? If we will do it, very often things will change.
Amen to that. And it's very often the self-reflection, right? The self-reflection piece that gets missed.
Uh-huh.
It's really easy to blame someone else and point out their flaws, but it's really, really hard to point that finger at ourselves and, look at ourselves and be like, "Yeah, I effed up. I messed up. I'm not doing good, or I'm not meeting here." It doesn't take much to go and read. I wanna say First Peter chapter something to where it talks about marriage, and there's a long passage about marriage. The Bible actually has a lot to say about marriage. I mean, a lot to say about your role in marriage as a man and as a woman. The Bible has a lot to say, and it breaks it down for you. It tells you exactly what to do. Crazy how that works out, right?
Yeah, 2,000 years ago.
Yeah, right. Pertinent today, but I think you're so totally right. The algorithms, right? And you
It's terrible now.
what you consume is what you put out, and I think there's so much hyper feminization, hyper feminine movement that's still continuing, and it's an extreme progressive feminine movement. I talk about this all the time, but it's extreme. That the things that we see online that women are doing, like we're in June and there's a viral video right now of this woman who made a video and said, "When is my turn to take a moment of silence for men's mental health?" Cranking up the music and dancing and partying, things like that. There's those things, and then there's these other challenges, and say this to your husband or do this and record his reaction, things like that. And it's so incredibly toxic. It's so incredibly bad for these relationships because it demasculizes men, and it knocks them down a peg, and it's toxic, and it creates that resentment of the men towards the women, and like
Anger,
yeah, it creates the anger,
because we're
which is
feeling
next.
inadequate,
Yep,
which
exactly.
triggers the anger, and then they
Yep.
start showing the video. but they never
Exactly.
show what's before. But we're not gonna be bashing and all that stuff. We'll
Yeah.
save that for another conversation.
Yeah, it's another conversation, but that's what I'm saying here is, like, you're totally right about the algorithms here. And then
But scary. It is
but then you
scary.
it is,
Yeah.
and then you hop on and you see this and you're like, everyone's justifying it. Yeah, all the comments and like, "Oh, yeah, girl, you leave them," and then it's like, "I'm gonna do that too," kinda thing. Let me hop on and, get this validation and this enabling behavior and things like that. And it's all just at the end of the day, it's the devil in the details, right? The devil's in the works, and he
Yep.
finds these very creative ways to just, "Oh, you're not happy, then, divorce." Could be a very happy situation. Well, a couple little fights and now things are blown up and it's like, "Oh, you're not happy. Leave and, end this marriage and go be in the world and, go do all these things," kind of thing, because you're not happy. You deserve to go find more happiness. And the grass is not always greener on the other side.
Sometimes it's crabgrass, artificial turf.
100%, 100%. And that's what the devil offers you, right? That is 100% what the other side offers you is that crabgrass, artificial turf, and stuff that's not real. What you had before was real, actual grass. All it
Yeah.
needed was a little bit of water, some
A
fertilizer,
fertilizer, weed killer.
maybe some
Yeah.
sand, things like that, level it out kinda thing, whatever. This isn't a lot we're it's a dad show, of course, we're gonna talk about lawns, okay? Come on now, give me a break. But no, all it needed was a little bit of water, but because you were putting in Coca-Cola, and now you're putting out Coca-Cola onto this grass, it's making it look worse because you're feeding the wrong thing in it. You're feeding your grass the wrong thing because of the influence that is coming in. So you're putting in Coca-Cola, and you're gonna put out Coca-Cola, and this show is in no way in form, fashion sponsored by Coca-Cola. I'm a Pepsi guy myself, but it's just for the metaphor here, okay, people?
It works. It works.
No free shout outs here, kind of thing. But it's yeah, it's really scary. The algorithms are really scary. It's hard to change your algorithm too once you're in it.
My
But that's
goodness. Yeah.
exactly where the devil lives in the algorithms, I think, 'cause that's where he knows he has some power. He has some dominion. He's like, "Let me let me get some power, and then let me distract them. Let me say that their algorithms are coming from China, or they're Chinese spy, or let me say that they're coming from this place or this thing, and let me lead them down all these rabbit holes and confuse them and not let them know it. Hey, it's actually me over here. I'm hiding right here. I'm right here in plain sight, but you're not going to see that. You're not going to see that. You're going to think, oh, it's because my phone's listening to me and all these conspiracy things like that. No, 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 no. It's not coincident. The devil has extreme power here on earth. This is his dominion, right? The earth is Satan's dominion.
But greater who is in us than he is in the world.
Exactly. And we've been washed clean. We've been washed with the blood. We've been washed of our sin. We've been washed and redeemed through Christ who redeems us, right? And we can cast off the devil. We can cast him out of here. And we can say, hey, you know what, dude? I've been washing the blood. Like you need to bounce, kid. Um, get out of here. Get off my feet. Get out of my algorithm, kind of thing. And then it's very quickly when we get what we're looking for. So if you're looking for the justification, the enabling, you're gonna get the justification in the enabling. But
In
if you're
everything.
looking for the Lord and you're looking for those hard-hitting videos that will make you stop and reflect and be like, "Look, I know you're going through it, but look, it's probably you. It's probably not the situation, it's probably you. Are you doing all the things?" My One of my pastors, his name is Matt Lewis, he reminds me of this every time I meet with him. And I walk out of his office and I walk into his office, and as soon as we start talking, I know it's me. I know I'm the problem. I know it's not God. It's me, and he reminds me every single time. He breaks it down. How you been doing? How you been praying? Most of the okay. Have you been reading and studying the Word? Oh well, and then okay. Have you how you going to church? Kind of going through the list, things like that. It's like, well, okay. Let me show you this for what is going on, from the Bible that, if you would read and you would pray about and you would take, 20 minutes in the morning and, spend some time and whatnot. And, you wouldn't be sitting here kind of thing. He doesn't directly say that, but he kind of does. But he's very loving. He's very kind. He's one of my favorite people on earth. I absolutely adore one of my pastors at church. That's in not a weird way either. Okay. But he always sets me straight in the most loving, kind, and firm, but gentle way.
That's great to have.
And he's a great influence for me. Whenever things are going good happens, I go to him. He tells me the same things to do. And it's like that's what God wants. God just wants our consistency in all things, in the good, in the bad, in the ugly, in the terrible, in the greatest times and the worst
Yeah.
times. And yeah, he just wants us. He just wants us. He just wants us in all the times and things like that. And yeah, sorry, I ranted.
It's easy to do. One of the things is depending on how we got here, it doesn't really matter how we got here. The fact is we're here. And if we have divorced parents, there's certain things that we can do that can help. The first thing you mentioned is God. You want something that transcends all the stuff. All the stuff that we're looking at is not new. Jesus talked about divorce, which means it was an issue 2,000 years ago, and it was written in the Word probably 3,000 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's not a new thing. We think everything is new and there's nothing new under the sun. So we want to make sure that we are able to walk in truth, having that relationship with Christ, and being empowered by the Spirit enables us to have the peace that passes all understanding and to be able to sift through all this stuff. The other thing you want is good resources. One of them, I wrote a book called Choose a Better Path, Overcoming the Impact of Your Parents' Divorce. And basically, it's just a devotional. It's an overview of the major issues that impact adults with divorced parents: not trusting, fear of doom, unforgiveness, guilt, grieving, just the major issues that impact adults with divorced parents. And I mentioned if you're experiencing gray divorce, there's a book called Home Will Never Be the Same Again. It's by Friedenberg, and I'm forgetting the other author. I don't remember the other author, but it's a really great book. It's a secular book, but a really great book on dealing with gray divorce. And that's just a huge issue. Our website is hopeforadp.com. Has all sorts of blogs and podcasts and videos. And I like to say it's not the Kent Darcie show, but I try and find the best resources out there that can help people deal with these issues, because there are issues. I encourage you, don't be like I was. I was in denial for decades. And my wife had to deal we just celebrated 41 years last year, which is the grace of God, because
Amen.
she had to deal with me. But don't be in denial like I was. It is not a coincidence that you heard this program. It's a God incidence. He wanted you to hear this. And, well, Ken, yeah, it's kind of a hassle, but it's not that bad. My friend, it's that bad. And if you're a dad, if you're a father, you're a husband, it's even more challenging. Because as Jay had said right now, and I agree to I don't put malice behind what's going on out there. I think it's spiritual, but there is an anti-male thing going right now.
Very
But
much.
how do we respond to that? The Bible doesn't say, eye for an eye. In fact, Jesus said just the opposite. You've heard that, but I say, love your enemies. Pray for those who spitefully use you. Walk in the spirit and not the flesh. Don't go into the anger thing and the wrath thing and all. No, kindness, gentleness, meekness. Guys, meekness is not weakness. Jesus went in and they said, don't come back and teach this stuff anymore. And what did he do? Next thing, next scene, Jesus is in there teaching the same stuff and doing whatever. I mean, he was meek, but he wasn't weak. He went in and turned over the tables. And we have this image today that Jesus was meek and mild and whatever and all. No, he was a man's man, but he didn't let, if you will, the algorithms mess with him. He walked in the truth. What I see my father doing, I do. And for a lot of us, the images of our fathers isn't that great. But we have a heavenly father who walks in truth, loves us enough that you would hear this program. And now you have a choice. One of the things that I teach when I do a workshop or anything is I look at Adam and Eve and I said, basically, Adam and Eve had a choice. They could follow God's way or they could follow their own way. And they chose to follow their own way. And we've been dealing with the consequences ever since. Well, our parents had a choice. They could follow their own path or they could follow God's path. And one or both of them chose to follow their own path. And we've been dealing with the consequences ever since. But now we have a choice. We can either go back to denial, not a big deal, the holidays are a hassle, or we can go, you know what? Yeah, yeah, I've got some anger issues here. You know what? And I've been blaming my wife like I did, or I'm blaming my boss, or I'm blaming politics or whatever. But you know what? That anger is because I feel inadequate. Man, she makes it feel like when you have that thought, guess what? That's the anger thing going on. And we want to reflect on that. Do you not trust people at all? Which is very common for adult children in divorce. Guess what? That's normal. Do you have issues with fear of doom? That you're always waiting for the other shoe to drop. You can never relax. And we become clingy or control freaks, or we become avoid. We just leave relationship after relationship after relationship because we don't want to be abandoned. Do you have all those issues? Then don't, from this moment forward, commit that we're going to get the resources. to deal with this situation. And if none of this applies to you, my parents have been married for 50 years and I'm good. Well, guess what? I guarantee you, in the next couple weeks, your coworker, somebody in your bowling league, somebody at your school is going to go, I can't believe my parents are divorcing. They've been married for 35 years. Guess what? You now can point them towards tools that can help. You can be somebody that can help nurture them and guide them through this rocky path. Or you have somebody that's, oh man, you can always tell people who have divorced parents in the fall. Because if you go, so what are you doing for Christmas? And they start with, that means I got divorced parents.
You can always
So
tell.
now, yeah. So now you point them towards resources that can help them, but you can only do that when you fly in a plane. They always say, if the plane's going to have a problem, the oxygen mask come down, put the oxygen mask on yourself first. If you've got divorced parents, get these tools, listen to this podcast again, and receive it that you can choose a better path. You can break the cycle of divorce. My father was divorced, his father was divorced, that's very common. But guess what? You can stop it here and now, today. And I encourage you to do so.
That I can. Thank you so much. So, with that, let's jump into the dad zone, which is 4 quick questions, and then we're gonna wrap this thing all the way up. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Perfect. This gift is all nicely wrapped. Now we're just gonna put a little bow on it. So the dad zone was intended for the end of the podcast to bring some fun to it. We can't have some big talks on this little podcast, so we like to have a little bit of fun here at the end and kind of leave on a fun note, mostly for ourselves, so that we can transition to the rest of our day as a host and guest here. So, first question here: you are hosting a dinner party. I'm allowing you to invite 3 guests, dead or alive, that you'd like to come. Who are you inviting?
Wow. Walter Cronkite, who most of you probably have no clue who he is, but he was the voice of America on the evening news for decades. Arthur Ashe, he was one of the first African American tennis players. I think the first one to win Wimbledon. And he had a demeanor. He walked in such a way with just class. And I really like that. And third person, who would I want to meet? Sinbad. He's a comedian and he's just a blast. And I think it would be really cool to have him at a dinner party.
Absolutely. What is your personal guilty pleasure food?
I love triple berry cobbler.
Right.
We make it, and I could sit and literally eat an entire bowl of it just by myself.
Delicious, delicious. And second to last question here in the dad zone, does pineapple go on pizza? And this is just a staple of the Young Dad podcast question.
No, no, that is not of God.
I got one. I've been on this streak of so many episodes and so many guests that just haven't all said yes. I'm like, come on, people. Are you psychos? No, I joke. To each their own is what I've learned through this. But no, it's just a fun question. It's a fun conversation to have. But no, you're right. It is not of God. And actually, I've actually talked to 2 Italian women that are both. One owns a pizza shop. Her family does, and they don't have a Hawaiian pineapple pizza on their menu. Uh,
There you go.
that's not of the people. That's not of the pizza people of Italy. So just saying. Last question here. What's one piece of advice that you would offer to a young dad, age 18 to 22, who's just starting out his fatherhood journey?
If there was one thing I wish, because I've got 3 kids, and they're all grown now. If there was one thing I wish I had known then that I know now, is that God is trustworthy. He is faithful. That even when it looks like everything is crazy and everything is whatever, and it just, he is faithful, that you can trust him. Now I have enough back memory. I mean, I just turned 65, so I've got some years behind me, and I can see over and over again where God was faithful. God protected me. God protected my family. God provided. I wish I had known that then and didn't have that burden on me. And probably a follow up to that is that my wife is not the enemy. Satan is. We talked about how Satan's out there and all this sort of stuff, and we talked about how inferiority is a huge issue for guys. Nothing makes us feel more inferior than our wife or our girlfriend. And that's not malice. That's not intent. It's just that she's relational. She has how things should be. She wants to help. And if we don't filter it right, we filter it as an attack or criticism. And that's not her heart. Most of the time, that's not her heart. So filter it that the enemy is not on the other side of the bed. The enemy is out there. She is a help mate. and her heart is to help, and anger destroys the heart. So there's no justification for anger. So I know that gave you like 3 answers, but
No, I
that's
think
how I
that
would
was
answer.
lovely and beautiful here. And Ken, much like you did, you shared glimpses of your testimony and you gave a call to action for people to come to Christ and to experience that as well as his resources, things like that. And people who listen to this, it's not a coincidence, it's a God incident. I absolutely love that. I'm stealing that. I'm gonna keep that. Um but it's one of those things that I love to do when we have these kind of conversations here on the podcast is to invite people to Christ and whatnot, as just my little podcast host self, and to use this platform for truth and for good. So if the things that we talked about today resonated with you, if you felt the spirit in any way, shape, or form, if you if this opened your mind and thought, you know what, maybe the devil is in the details, and I do need to do some reflection and things like that, and or you don't have a relationship with God, it's never too late. It's not too late. You can start today. You can start right now. You can accept Jesus as your savior and whatnot. I'm not a pastor, can't baptize you or anything like that, but there is always time, there's always room and space for God and for Jesus in your life. And I truly believe that as a husband, as a father, you can have the happiest life on earth, but you will never have happiness, true happiness, until you have God as part of your life, as part of your family, as part of your day to day. So I truly invite everyone to take this challenge, take not this challenge, but take this invitation to to look up a Bible verse, to pray, to see what happens, to see what you feel, uh, or to go to that church this weekend that you've been driving past. You're like, I should, man, kind of want to check that place out, kind of thing. To follow those inclinations and those intuitions, because those are from the spirit itself. Those are from God Himself. With that, Kent, big thanks for being with me today. Big thanks for this conversation. This was really great. To our listeners, if today's episode hit home for you, make sure you check out Kent's website, hope number 4adp.com for blogs, podcasts, and resources on healing from the ripple effects of your parents' divorce. You can also pick up his book, Choose a Better Path, a must read for anyone ready to break this cycle. So, with that, to the guests as well, very last thing here. You're listening to a podcast, do all the things that you can to support the podcast. You've listened to plenty of them. If you haven't subscribed, if you haven't followed, if you haven't given a review, left a review, given 5 stars, what are you waiting for? Just do it. It takes 5 seconds. It doesn't hurt you, but it helps the podcast a ton. Those are just the little things that you can do that make every podcaster happy. So go and do them right now. And of course, engage with the content as well. If you really like what we're doing over here at Young Dad Podcast, you can always go down to the description of the episode. You can click the links to the website, to the link tree, and find ways that you can help and support the show as well, monetarily and also just with support. And as well, last thing, over on the website, youngdadpod.com, you can download a free interactive activity guide as well as other resources as well, for you to do with your family, do with your kids based on every single episode. So those are really cool. Those are free resources I put out there for everyone. There's like a ton of them. So you can sort through those. Really good stuff over there. And yeah, with that, I hope you enjoyed your juice box today. I hope your snack was delicious. And I will see you next time right here on the Young Dad Podcast.